Welcome back, students, and here is our review of Chapter 5, the one where Daisy and Gatsby begin their love affair in Nick's living room. Chapter 5 begins at 2 a.m. when Nick gets back from his date with Jordan, and Gatsby is standing creepily outside Nick's house awaiting Nick's reply. He's excited as Christmas morning. He tries to play it cool, but he can't. Nick agrees to invite Daisy over for tea. So Gatsby returns the favor by offering Nick an opportunity to make money on the side. Check this out. Why, Gatsby says, why, look here, old sport, you don't make very much money, do you? Ouch! I thought you didn't, if you pardon me. I carry on a business on the side, a sort of sideline thing. You understand. And I thought if you don't make very much money, this would interest you. It won't take up very much of your time, and you might pick up a nice bit of money. It happens to be a rather confidential thing. You can't tell anyone about it. And you won't have to do any business with that scary guy in Chapter 4, Meyer Wolfsheim. This is suspicious. Nick says no when he plays it off that he doesn't have enough time. He's got too much on his plate right now, but he does admit that under different circumstances, he would actually go into business with Gatsby. So much for honesty, Nick. Okay, so the big day arrives. Gatsby has been waiting for this moment for 5 years. Remember, it was 5 years ago that Daisy and Gatsby said goodbye in New York City. She said, I love you, Gatsby. I promise I'll wait for you. I promise. He goes over to fight in World War I, and then she marries Tom, and he spent the last 5 years trying to win back her heart. Oh my goodness, Gatsby is a hopeless and helpless romantic. It's been 5 years. The big day arrives, and Gatsby, true to form, goes way over the top. Like, way over the top. First thing, he sends a gardener over to Nick's house to cut the grass. Man, he's just going to keep insulting Nick. That's insulting. Then Nick goes into town to buy two things. He buys a nice bouquet of flowers and some cookies that he can have on the coffee table when Daisy arrives. Well, the flowers were unnecessary, for at 2 o'clock, a greenhouse arrived from Gatsby's with innumerable receptacles to contain it. Folks, the greenhouse is a florist shop. The receptacles are vases. There are so many flowers in Nick's house that it looks like he's either hosting a wedding or a funeral in his living room. That's way too much. Furthermore, Gatsby sends over tons and tons and tons of desserts. Remember those small little cookies that Nick brought to put on the coffee table? Those too were unnecessary because Gatsby brought all of this, and he asked, like, hey, Nick, do we have enough food? Nick takes Gatsby to the pantry where they scrutinize the 12 lemon cakes. That's not to include the raspberry cakes and the crumpets and the biscuit and all the other things that Gatsby sent over to Nick's house. Folks, his house looks like this. Gatsby, dude, you gotta calm down. Way too over the top. All right. So while they wait for Daisy, Gatsby is all nerves, and it's 2 minutes to 4. She's supposed to arrive in 2 minutes, and Gatsby's like, I can't do it. She's not coming. The food isn't right. The sky's too blue. I can't do it. Nick's like, sit down. She'll be here. When Daisy arrives, as usual, Nick describes her voice and how special and excited that voice is. Nick, you've got to stop crushing on your cousin's voice. It's kind of weird. Gatsby. All right, so when Daisy gets there, as usual, we hear her voice. Now, when Daisy comes in, remember the plan was that Gatsby was supposed to be in the living room? But he wasn't. So Daisy and Nick walk in expecting to see Gatsby. He's not there. He runs around the back of the house, gets soaking wet, and now he is standing at the front door. He knocks on the door, and then, oh my goodness, he finally comes in, and this is awkward. He comes in, and they meet again for the first time in 5 years. For half a minute, there wasn't a sound. Then, from the living room, I heard a soft sort of choking murmur and a part of a laugh followed by Daisy's voice on a clear, artificial note. "I'm certainly am awfully glad to see you again." A pause. It endured horribly. "Oh, poor Nick. I wish you can just get out of there." And that's exactly what he does. He tries to leave the two alone for a minute, but even the silence sounds awkward, so Gatsby joins them. He's like, "Nick, don't go." So Gatsby gives Nick in the other room, they're in the other room, and Daisy's in the living room. "Can I see you for a minute?" And he flips out about how badly things are going. Nick suggests that Daisy might feel less uncomfortable if they were not speaking about her in clearly audible tones in the room next door. Finally, Gatsby goes to join Daisy and the two talk. Nick, on the other hand, doesn't know what to do with himself, so he goes outside of his own house in the pouring rain and waits for a half an hour. Do you realize how pathetic this is? This is like the worst third wheel moment in the history of American literature. Gatsby and Daisy are having an affair in Nick's living room, and he's just outside in the rain waiting. Poor Nick. This is awkward. Okay, half hour passes. Nick finally comes back in and he thinks that he can just send those two on their way, but no, the date's not over. Daisy goes into the bathroom to powder her nose, and Nick and Gatsby look at awe at Gatsby's house. And then Gatsby accidentally slips up about how he earned the money for that. "It took me just 3 years to earn the money that bought it." "I thought you inherited your money," Nick says. "I did, old sport," he said automatically, "but I lost most of it in the big panic, the panic of the war." I thought he hardly knew what he was saying, for when I asked him what business he was in, he answered, "That's my affair," and then realized it was a bad way to respond. And then he's like, "Wait, are you reconsidering coming into business with me in Meyer Wolfsheim? Because if you are, I'll tell you about it. But if not, I'm not going to tell you about it." Gatsby, you're a shady character. Okay, so now Gatsby wants to take Daisy on a tour in his house, but he insists that Nick join. "I want you and Daisy to come over to my house," he said. "I'd like to show her around." "Are you sure you want me to come?" Nick says. "Absolutely, old sport." And the awkward third wheel date continues. Now, as they're touring Gatsby's house, it becomes painfully obvious that Gatsby only has such a fine house and such fine things for the purpose of impressing Daisy. If Daisy liked it, Gatsby liked it. If Daisy doesn't like it, he doesn't like it. And then this whole shenanigan culminates in Gatsby's bedroom. And Gatsby starts bragging about his wardrobe and his expensive shirts. "I've got a man in England who buys me clothes. He sends over a selection of things at the beginning of each season, spring and fall." And he took out a pile of shirts and began throwing them one by one before us. Shirts of sheer linen and thick silk and fine flannel, which lost their folds. Shirts with stripes and scrolls and plaids and coral and apple green and lavender and faint orange and monograms of Indian blue. And then, suddenly, with a strange sound, Daisy bent her head into the shirts and began to cry stormily. "They're such beautiful shirts," she sobbed, her voice muffled in the thick folds. "It makes me sad because I've never seen such beautiful shirts before." Daisy has seen such beautiful shirts before. She's married to Tom. She owns dozens or probably hundreds of beautiful shirts herself, and so does Tom. So why is she crying about this? Well, she's crying because she's mourning the life she could have had with Gatsby. Remember how she married Tom for money? She realizes that she could have married Gatsby and been just as wealthy, but more importantly, she could have married Gatsby and had love too. So, do you remember the green light at the end of chapter 1? Well, it's back. So once Daisy is done wiping her snot with Gatsby's silk shirts, the three walk over to the window and Gatsby says, "If it weren't for the mist, we could see your home across the bay. You always have a green light that burns all night at the end of your dock." Daisy put her arm through his abruptly, but he seemed absorbed in what he had just said. Possibly it had occurred to him that the colossal significance of that light had now vanished forever. Compared to the great distance that had separated him from Daisy, it had seemed very near to her, almost touching her. It had seemed as close as a star to the moon. Now it was again a green light on a dock. His count of enchanted objects had diminished by one. Nick muses that since Daisy is now here with Gatsby, the green light loses its magical, mysterious significance. The present, it seems, doesn't really live up to the past ideals. Okay, this next part's important. While they're perusing Gatsby's house, Nick explains that a large frame picture is the one of Mr. Dan Cody, supposedly an old friend who's dead now. Keep that in mind. Now, this is the best picture I could find of him. It's not framed. Sorry. They go downstairs and they have this man Klipspringer play The Love Nest on the piano. But then Nick notices something about Gatsby at the end of the evening. As Nick walked over to say goodbye, he saw that the expression of bewilderment had come back into Gatsby's face. Gatsby is confused. He's perplexed. As though a faint doubt had occurred to him as to the quality of his present happiness. Almost 5 years. There must have been moments, even that afternoon, when Daisy tumbled short of his dreams. Not through her own faults, but because of the colossal vitality of his illusion. It had gone beyond her, beyond everything. Gatsby is not quite happy with Daisy. And it's because Gatsby isn't in love with Daisy. He's in love with the idea of Daisy. Not only that, he's in love with the idea of Daisy that he had from 5 years ago. The Daisy before Tom. The Daisy before she had a child. The Daisy before her disillusionment. Of course, she's not going to live up to his expectations. His expectations are impossible to meet. Nick heads home, leaving Gatsby and Daisy alone. Now, chapter 6. In this chapter, we're going to learn more about Gatsby's past, and we're going to learn the truth about when and how Gatsby makes his money. And remember that picture of Dan Cody? Well, that's explained here too. Also, Tom is going to start wising up about Daisy's affair, and a showdown between Tom and Gatsby is going to start.